The storm had clawed at the desert all night, hurling dust and thunder across the vast red mesas of Arizona territory. Inside a lonely cabin built from pine and grief, a woman sat beside a half-dead fire. Her black dress clung to her like shadowed sorrow, the sleeves torn from days of travel. She was 30, but the desert had stolen the youth from her eyes and replaced it with something harder: endurance. Her name was Eleanor Vale, a widow not by choice but by war. The civil conflict had taken her husband, her land, and every direction except west. The mountains had seemed like the last place where ghosts couldn't find her, but even there, the desert had other plans. When the door burst open with the fury of the wind, Eleanor flinched. A tall figure filled the frame, lightning slicing across his face. He was bare-chested beneath a soaked deerskin cloak, his long black hair plastered to his shoulders, his expression carved in anger and pain. It was the Apache she had found half dead near the river 2 days ago, the man she had dragged from the water, stitched with her trembling hands, and nursed through fever. Now, standing before her fire. His dark eyes burned like the embers that refused to die in the hearth. "You will have to leave my cabin," he said. Voice low but edged with thunder. The words cut through the crackle of rain. Eleanor straightened, clutching the small iron poker beside her. "Leave? This is my place," she said, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her. "You were dying when I found you." He took a slow step forward, the floorboards groaning beneath his weight. "You should not have done that," he growled. "My people do not owe the mercy of white women." She blinked, taken aback. "Mercy? I wasn't looking for a dead stranger. I found a man who'd bleed to death before morning. Anyone with a heart would have done the same." His jaw tightened. "Your people do not do the same." The silence between them thickened, heavy as the clouds outside. Eleanor stared into his eyes, fierce, wounded, unflinching, and saw the storm inside him was deeper than the one outside. "I didn't ask for company," she said finally. "Nor did I," he replied. "But you cannot stay here when the storm ends. This place is not safe for you." Her heart quickened. "From what?" "From you?" He turned from her, walking toward the window, where lightning flickered across the endless expanse of sand and stone. "From men worse than me," he said, his voice breaking softer now, but still carrying that dangerous calm. "They saw me fall. They will come." Eleanor's grip on the poker loosened. She swallowed hard. "You're being hunted." "I am Apache," he said simply. "We are always hunted." The wind wailed through the cracks in the door. Outside, the desert felt alive, angry, ancient. Eleanor rose slowly, her skirt brushing against the dusty floor. "Then I'll leave," she said. "But not until the morning." He turned sharply, his eyes flashing like flint. "You do not understand. Morning may not come." Something in his tone made her still. Beneath his fury there was fear, not of dying, but of something darker. She stepped closer, against her own caution. The firelight painted his bronze skin in gold and shadow. "Then tell me who's coming," she whispered. He didn't look at her at first. Then, slowly, his gaze found hers. "Men with rifles. Bounty riders from Tucson. They want Apache blood. And gold they think I carry. Do you?" He gave the faintest trace of a bitter smile. "If I did, I wouldn't have fallen into your river." The wind groaned again, and this time it carried something else. The faint, haunting echo of distant hooves. Eleanor's breath caught. He heard it too. He reached for the knife strapped to his thigh, then met her gaze once more. "If you stay," he said, "you might die for a man you do not know." She held his stare, steady this time. "Then you'd better tell me who you are before that happens." He hesitated only a moment before answering. "My name," he said quietly, "is Tayan." Outside, thunder cracked open the night, and the storm brought more than rain. The thunder faded, but the echoes of hooves grew louder, steady, rhythmic, and far too many for comfort. Eleanor's breath quickened as she crossed to the window. The storm clouds broke just long enough for moonlight to slip through, silvering the red dust that swirled outside. "There," she whispered. "Riders." Tayan didn't flinch. He stood beside the open door, every muscle rigid, like a wolf scenting the wind. The firelight threw bronze and shadow across his chest, highlighting the scars that spoke of battles she couldn't imagine. "How many?" he asked. "6, maybe 7, she said. "They're coming fast." Tayan's gaze shifted to her for the briefest second. "You must hide. Behind the chimney, there's a crawl space. Take your rifle if you have one." "I'm not hiding in my own house," Eleanor said, her chin lifting. "You think I'd drag you from the river just to abandon you now?" His lips pressed into a hard line. "You don't understand these men. They're not soldiers or lawmen. They hunt for sport, for money, and for hate. And you?" she asked softly. "What did you do to earn their hate?" Tayan's eyes darkened. "I lived." For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Then, with the sound of the riders drawing near, he moved to the table, picking up the rifle she'd cleaned days ago. He checked the chamber, nodded once, and handed it to her. "You know how to shoot?" "I've lost too much not to," she said. He almost smiled, almost. Then aimed true. Outside, the pounding of hooves stopped. The storm had softened to a drizzle, and the desert smelled of wet earth and gun oil. Through the narrow window, Eleanor could see lanterns swaying in the darkness. 6 men on horseback, their coats dripping, their faces half hidden beneath wide-brimmed hats. One of them called out, his voice coarse and cruel, "We know you're in there, Redskin. Come out easy, and we might let the woman keep her cabin." Tayan's jaw tightened. "They tracked my blood trail here," he muttered. "They'll burn this place to smoke if I don't face them." Eleanor turned sharply toward him. "And if you do, they'll kill you." He looked at her then, truly looked into her pale eyes, tired but burning with something he hadn't expected to find in this cold land. Defiance. "I've seen too many die because they ran," Tayan said. "I will not add you to that count." Without waiting for an answer, he stepped into the rain. "Wait," Eleanor hissed, grabbing his arm. His skin was hot despite the storm. "You said they want gold. Tell them you don't have it." Tayan's expression softened for just a moment. Truth doesn't change what men see in their greed. Then he was gone, his shadow swallowed by the night. Eleanor's pulse thundered in her ears as she crouched near the window, rifle steady. Through the gray veil of rain, she saw him stand before the riders, unarmed except for his knife. One of the men laughed, a tall brute with a silver star pinned to his chest. "Ain't often we find a stray Apache worth coin," he jeered. "Boys, the governor's bounty still stands, $50 a head." The men chuckled, circling like vultures. Tayan stood silent, his long black hair hanging in wet strands across his face. "You come for silver and stories," he said. "You'll leave with neither." Eleanor's grip tightened. The man with the star raised his rifle. Big talk for a man bleeding out. Before he could fire, a shot cracked through the rain, not from the men, but from the cabin. Eleanor's bullet struck the hat from his head, grazing his ear. Tayan moved in that same heartbeat, lightning in flesh. He lunged, disarming one rider, driving his knife into another's thigh. The chaos that followed was savage and short. Thunder rolled, hooves scattered, and men cursed as bullets tore through the night. By the time the dust settled, 3 lay wounded, 2 fled into the dark, and 1 horse screamed as it bolted across the flats. Tan stumbled back toward the cabin, blood streaking his arm. Eleanor threw the door open, rifle still hot in her hands. "You're bleeding again," she gasped. He brushed past her, his breath rough but controlled. Better than dying. He dropped to a knee by the fire, clutching his side. She hurried to his aid, pressing a rag to the wound. You didn't have to protect me. His gaze lifted, fierce and low. Yes, I did. Because now they know your face. Outside, the last echoes of hoofbeats faded into the storm. But in the silence that followed, both of them knew this was only the beginning. The storm quieted by dawn, leaving the desert wrapped in mist and silence. Smoke curled from the cabin's chimney, but the scent of gunpowder lingered stronger than the firewood. Eleanor stood by the door, her rifle still in hand, staring into the pale horizon where the riders had vanished. Tayan sat by the hearth, his side freshly bandaged, the firelight dancing over the lean, powerful lines of his body. His long black hair clung to his shoulders, and the faint gleam of his tribal jewelry caught the flicker of the flames. His breathing was steady but shallow, a warrior's way of hiding pain. They'll come back, he said quietly, not looking at her. Men like that don't lose easy. Eleanor turned. Then we leave. His dark eyes lifted to her, skeptical. Leave? You have no horse, no weapon strong enough to cross that mesa alive. I have my will, she said, setting the rifle on the table with a clatter. That's kept me alive this long. Tayan studied her, the defiance in her chin, the storm still burning in her blue-gray eyes. He saw a woman who had buried more than a husband. He saw someone who refused to surrender, even to the desert. You could stay, he said after a moment. There's a mine shaft in the hills. I could lead them away. Eleanor shook her head. You're half dead, and I'm not hiding like a frightened rabbit while men with guns tear apart my home. He exhaled through his nose, a sound between a sigh and a growl. You are stubborn, woman. And you are alive because of it, she shot back. For the first time, a ghost of a smile touched his lips. Maybe the spirit sent me the wrong savior. Eleanor turned to the window again, her hands trembling slightly, though she hid it well. Then where do we go? Tayan stood, the light revealing the deep red marks beneath his bandage. To the Red Mesa. There's a canyon there, hidden by stone and shadow. My people once took refuge there when the cavalry burned our camps. No white man has ever found it. She met his gaze. Will your people be there? His expression hardened. No, not anymore. The weight in his voice silenced her. She nodded slowly, understanding enough to stop asking. By the time the sun rose fully, they were ready. Eleanor packed what food she had, a little jerky, hard bread, and dried beans, into a canvas satchel. Tayan took only a knife, a single bullet, and the old rifle. Before they left, Eleanor paused by the cabin's doorway. This place was the last thing I owned, she said softly. Tayan looked back once. Then let it burn behind you. Some ghosts need fire to rest. They rode on foot across the valley, moving through brush and shadow. The desert after rain was alive, the air heavy with sage, the earth glistening with dew. But beneath that beauty, danger stirred. Twice, Tayan stopped to study the ground, kneeling to touch the mud. They follow, he murmured. Eleanor swallowed. How can you tell? He showed her the faint imprint of a horseshoe half swallowed by rain. They're careful, but not careful enough. They pressed on, climbing a ridge that overlooked the Red Mesa, a vast table of crimson stone, rising like a giant's altar above the plains. The sky had cleared, burning gold with noon light. Eleanor's breath hitched at the sight. It's beautiful, she whispered. Tayan's voice was low. It's sacred. They descended toward the canyon, the ground narrowing into a hidden passage between boulders. The air grew cooler, quieter. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. As they reached the narrow bend, Tayan suddenly froze. His hand shot up in warning. Eleanor stopped, her heart hammering. What is it? He crouched low, eyes scanning the shadows. Smoke from the west. She followed his gaze and saw it. A thin column rising far across the valley, too straight to be natural. Signal fire? She asked. He nodded grimly. They've called for help. More are coming. Eleanor looked around, fear creeping into her voice. Then what do we do now? Tayan turned to her, the storm back in his eyes. We disappear, he said. The canyon can hide us if we reach its heart before they do. As they pressed forward into the red stone labyrinth, the echo of distant gunshots carried faintly through the wind, a warning that the hunt was not over. Eleanor gripped her satchel tighter. Tayan, she whispered, why risk your life for me? He didn't answer at first. Then, in a voice roughened by truth, he said, because once someone risked theirs for me, and I ran. I will not run again. The canyon swallowed them whole, its shadows deep and ancient, and somewhere beyond the cliffs, death rode closer. By dusk, the Red Mesa loomed like a wounded god above them, its cliffs bleeding crimson under the fading light. The canyon below opened in silence, a maze of shadows and forgotten stone, its walls carved by centuries of wind and water. Eleanor followed close behind Tayan as they descended into the ravine. The air cooled quickly, carrying the scent of damp clay and sage. Above, hawks circled lazily, but down here, the world was still. So still it felt sacred. Tayan stopped near a narrow rock face and brushed away the sand with his hand. Symbols emerged, ancient carvings spiraling around a sun shape. This place, he said softly, was once a refuge. My ancestors called it Sekithi, the place where voices sleep. Eleanor traced the carvings with her eyes, not daring to touch. It's beautiful, she whispered. He nodded but didn't smile. Beauty doesn't mean safety. They moved deeper until they found a small overhang, half hidden by stone and brush. A trickle of water seeped from the rocks nearby, clean and cold. Tayan crouched, cupping his hands to drink, then motioned for her to do the same. You can rest here, he said. The path splits ahead. They'll have to choose the wrong way first. Eleanor sat on a flat stone, her breath heavy. You sound sure of it. Tayan looked up, his expression unreadable. I grew up in these lands. They do not welcome strangers. She studied him quietly, the way the dying light caught his features, turning his dark eyes almost amber, the lines of strength and weariness etched deep into his face. You keep speaking of your people, she said carefully. What happened to them? His jaw tightened. He glanced toward the horizon. The soldiers came. They said they wanted peace. But peace always has a price. My father refused to give up our land, and they burned it instead. Eleanor's voice trembled. And your family? He turned back to her, his gaze sharp as an arrow. Gone, all of them. The silence that followed was thick enough to swallow the canyon itself. Eleanor felt her heart twist. I'm sorry. Tayan shook his head. Don't be. The land remembers, even if men do not. He stood and walked to the edge of the ravine, scanning the horizon. They're still coming, he said. The bounty men. I can feel them in the wind. Eleanor joined him. The night was falling fast, painting the world in shades of violet and black. Somewhere far away, a faint echo drifted, a single gunshot swallowed by distance. They're closer than before, she murmured. Tayan's hand brushed the knife at his belt. We'll move at dawn. She frowned. And until then? He glanced at her, then toward a pile of driftwood by the water. We build a fire. The night here can kill slower than bullets. Soon the flames crackled softly, painting the canyon walls in gold. Time sat cross-legged beside it, sharpening his knife with quiet patience. The shadows danced across his chest, the firelight glinting off his tribal necklace, a carved stone eagle strung on leather. Eleanor watched him in silence for a while before speaking. "You said this place is sacred. Won't the fire draw spirits?" His eyes flickered to hers. "It will," he said. "But they are my ancestors. They will not harm us." Something in his voice, low, certain, reverent, sent a shiver down her spine. "Do you believe they still watch you?" He stopped sharpening and looked into the flames. "Every warrior carries his dead with him," he said softly. "They watch to see if we've learned." Eleanor's gaze dropped to her hands. "And what do you think they see now?" He turned his head toward her, his voice barely above a whisper. "A woman who walks with courage in a place where courage dies." She met his eyes, and for the first time, neither of them looked away. The fire crackled between them, a fragile warmth against the cold stone and deeper fears. But the quiet didn't last. A sound cut through the canyon, faint at first, then sharper. The clatter of loose rock. Tayan rose in an instant, motioning for silence. His body tensed, every muscle alive. He moved toward the shadowed slope, listening. Eleanor gripped the rifle, her pulse pounding. "What is it?" she whispered. Tayan crouched, eyes narrowing toward the darkness. "Not riders," he said. "Something else." Then came a low, distant whistle, followed by another, echoing from the opposite wall. Eleanor's face went pale. "They've found us." Tayan drew his knife, the firelight gleaming across its edge. "No," he said, his tone turning grim. "They've surrounded us." As the night wind howled through the canyon, Eleanor felt the truth settle like stone in her chest. The hunters were here, and this sacred ground was about to be stained again. The storm clouds loomed over the canyon like a curtain of bruised steel as Aiyana and Tarak raced across the plateau. The wind howled between the cliffs, lifting dust and lightning into a violent dance. Tarak's horse snorted, sensing the tension, while Aiyana's hands trembled as she clutched the saddle. Behind them, torches flickered pursuers from both worlds. Soldiers sent by the fort commander wanted Aiyana back, believing she'd been abducted by an Apache warrior. And a small group of Tarak's own men followed too, questioning his loyalty for protecting a white woman. They were both hunted now. Tarak slowed his horse, glancing over his shoulder at the twin lines of firelight. His face, bronzed by battle and the sun, showed no fear, but deep in his eyes flickered something else. The burden of choice. Aiyana's voice trembled. "They'll catch us, Tarak. We can't fight them both." Tarak turned toward her, his hair whipping like a black river in the wind. "Then we make them see," he said, his voice low, calm. "We make them see what love and truth are worth." They stopped near a rock ledge where a small cave offered shelter from the rain that began to fall. Inside, the cave glowed faintly with light from Tarak's flint fire. The rain hissed on the flames as thunder rolled across the sky. Aiyana sat on the ground, wrapping her arms around herself. "You should go," she whispered. "You still have a people who might forgive you." "I've already lost everything." Tarak knelt in front of her. "You think I can walk away now?" His fingers brushed her wet hair from her cheek. "When you rode into my world, you carried my heart with you. I would rather face death and live without its beat." She looked up at him then, eyes glistening like the rain outside. "But if we stay, they'll kill you. Both sides will." He smiled faintly, his dimples deep against his sharp jawline. "Then they will learn what it means to fight a man who loves with all his soul." Lightning flashed, illuminating the scars on his chest, the marks of past battles, of a life spent defending a land and people who now questioned him. Aiyana reached out, tracing one of the scars with trembling fingers. "You carry pain like armor," she murmured. "And you," he said softly, "carry hope like fire." Outside, the sound of hooves grew louder. The soldiers had arrived at the edge of the canyon. Their torches flickered like a sea of orange stars reflected in the rain. Tarak stood, reaching for his spear. But Aiyana stopped him. "No," she said. "Not this way. What other way is there?" he demanded, his voice breaking through the roar of the storm. She stepped forward, her pale dress clinging to her body in the rain. "The way of truth." Before he could stop her, she walked out of the cave and into the open. The soldiers froze at the sight of her, a woman they thought stolen, standing side by side with the man they called savage. The Apache warriors, too, halted atop the ridge, watching in tense silence. Aiyana raised her hands. "Stop this madness," she shouted, her voice echoing off the cliffs. "He didn't take me, I came to him. Because he saved my life when you left me to die." Her words rippled through the canyon like thunder. The soldiers hesitated. Even the Apache warriors exchanged uneasy glances. Tarak stepped beside her, spear lowered. The storm wind tore at his hair in tribal beads, and the lightning painted his bare chest in silver fire. "You call me enemy," he shouted, "but I fought no war today, only tried to protect what the Great Spirit put in my path." For a long, trembling moment, no one moved. Then an arrow whistled from the ridge, striking the ground between them. The storm erupted. Gunfire and shouting filled the air. Tarak grabbed Aiyana, pulling her back toward the rocks. "Run!" he yelled. But Aiyana clung to him, refusing to leave. "If you fall, I fall too." The rain poured harder now, soaking the canyon floor as lightning split the sky above them. Tarak's eyes burned not with fear, but with resolve. He turned, lifted his spear, and faced the chaos head-on. Love had made him a traitor to both worlds, but it had also made him unstoppable. As thunder cracked above and fire flashed below, the mountain bore witness to a love that refused to bow even beneath the storm. The rain had slowed to a whisper by dawn, leaving the canyon blanketed in fog and silence. Smoke still drifted from the fire Tarak and Aiyana had kindled through the night. The storm had taken much from them, sleep, warmth, safety, but not hope. Aiyana sat by the cave entrance, her soaked dress now drying slowly against her skin. Her eyes followed Tarak as he stood at the edge of the clearing, his long black hair damp and wild, his body gleaming with morning dew. He looked like something carved from the mountains themselves, strong, silent, untamed. "You should rest," she said softly. Tarak didn't answer. His gaze swept across the valley below, where trails of smoke still rose from burned brush, the path the soldiers had taken. "They'll return," he said at last, his voice rough as gravel. "Men like them don't stop until something or someone stops them." Aiyana drew her shawl tighter. "Then we'll be ready." He turned toward her, a hint of disbelief in his dark eyes. You've already lost enough. You don't belong in this war." She met his stare with quiet resolve. "Maybe I didn't choose it, but I'm already in it. When they came to take my land, they took my peace. I won't let them take my will too." Something flickered in Tarak's eyes, respect, maybe even admiration. He knelt by the fire and began to trace symbols in the sand. "Then you must understand what this means," he said. "The Apache do not fight for vengeance. We fight for balance. For the land, the spirits, the truth." He looked up at her. "If I fight to protect the land your husband stole." The words hit her like a stone. For a long moment, she said nothing. "Then maybe this is how I make it right," she whispered. "By standing beside you, not against you." Tarak's jaw tightened, and for the first time, the anger in his expression softened. The fire between them cast long shadows on the canyon walls, two figures from different worlds, united by guilt, defiance, and something neither could name. As the morning passed, Tarak began to prepare for the coming fight. He smeared clay and ash across his skin. his muscles flexing under the ritual's rhythm. Aiyana watched in silence, both frightened and mesmerized. Every motion of his hands, every whisper in Apache tongue, carried centuries of pride and pain. When he finally stood, he looked toward her. "When the sun reaches that cliff," he said, pointing east, "they'll come through the pass. I'll draw them away. You take the trail behind the red rocks. It leads to safety." "No," she said immediately. "If you die here, I die too." Tarak's eyes burned like the firelight. "You don't understand, Aiyana. I was never meant to live beyond this war." She stepped closer, rain mist curling between them. "Then let me change that." For a heartbeat, the canyon was utterly still. Tarak's breath trembled. Then, slowly, he reached out his hand, cupping her face, rough and warm. "You speak like the wind before a storm," he murmured. Soft but powerful enough to move mountains. Before she could speak again, a distant echo broke the moment. Hoofbeats, faint but certain. Tarak's head snapped toward the sound. "They're here." He seized his bow and knife, his body moving with deadly precision. Aiyana followed him to the canyon mouth, her heart pounding. She could see the glint of bayonets in the distance, the dust of horses against the horizon. "Tarak," she began, but he silenced her with a look. "Whatever happens, remember this," he said. "You owe the land your breath, not your blood." Then he ran. She watched as he vanished into the mist, shirtless, fierce, unstoppable. The mountains seemed to echo his war cry, ancient and haunting. The air trembled with the thunder of hooves, gunfire, and the scream of the desert wind. Aiyana fell to her knees, clutching the amulet he had left behind, woven with bone, turquoise, and strands of his own hair. Her tears mixed with the rain as the canyon burned with the sound of battle. And as the smoke rose once more over the Red Mesa, she whispered into the wind, "Come back to me, Tarak." But the only answer was the fading echo of his war cry, half fury, half prayer, carried away into the endless dawn. The gunfire had long ceased, yet the canyon still trembled with its memory. Smoke coiled upward into the pale morning sky, and the smell of blood, iron, and rain lingered like a curse. Aiyana stumbled through the ravine, her hands trembling as she clutched Tarak's amulet, the one woven from bone and turquoise, still warm from his skin. Every step she took sank into mud and ash. Bodies of soldiers lay scattered along the canyon floor, their rifles half buried in the wet earth. The air was silent, except for the distant caw of a crow circling above the cliffs. "Tarak," she called, her voice breaking. "Tarak, answer me." No reply came. Only the whisper of wind through the rocks, like the breath of ancient spirits. She kept moving forward, her dark dress torn, her heart pounding in her chest. Then, just beyond the shattered boulders, she saw movement. A flicker of black hair against the red stones. "Tarak," she breathed. He was there, kneeling beside a fallen horse, his body covered in mud and blood. His long black hair hung loose, streaked with dust and rain. The sunlight caught on his tribal jewelry, now tarnished by the fight. Aiyana ran to him, falling to her knees beside him. "You're alive," she whispered, her hands trembling as they touched his face. Tarak opened his eyes slowly. Pain flickered through them, but also something softer, relief. "You shouldn't have come," he rasped. "I told you," she said, voice shaking. "If you die here, I die too." He tried to speak, but coughed instead. Blood stained his lips. Still, his hand found hers and squeezed it weakly. "They're gone," he whispered. "The soldiers. They won't return." She looked around. The canyon was quiet now, eerily so. "You did this," she said, tears filling her eyes. "You stopped them." He shook his head faintly. "No, the spirits did. They carried my anger, my fire. I was only their hand." Aiyana's throat tightened. She pressed her forehead to his, the sound of her sobs mingling with the sighing wind. "You can't leave me now, Tarak, not after everything." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried both sorrow and peace. "Aiyana," he murmured, "the land does not take, it gives back in other ways." She shook her head violently. "No, I won't lose you. I can help you." "There's medicine." "There is none for what is already written," he interrupted gently. His fingers brushed against her cheek, leaving a streak of blood. "But you can live. The land will forgive you because your heart stayed." A gust of wind swept through the canyon then, carrying with it the faint sound of drums, low, rhythmic, ancient. Aiyana froze. She knew that sound. It was the Apache morning chant. On the cliffs above, figures appeared, Tarak's people, watching silently from horseback. They were proud, solemn, cloaked in the colors of earth and smoke. One of them raised a hand in salute, the feathers of his headdress swaying in the breeze. Tarak's eyes flickered toward them. "They have come," he whispered, "to bring me home." Aiyana clutched him tighter, tears falling freely. "Please, stay with me." He reached up, his fingers brushing her hair. "You gave me peace, Aiyana. That is more than life." And with that, his eyes closed. His body went still, his spirit carried away with the wind that danced through the canyon. The drums faded, and for a moment all was silence. Aiyana stayed there, holding him, until the sun rose high over the cliffs. Then, with trembling hands, she laid him upon the red earth, crossing his arms over his chest. From his necklace, she took one turquoise bead and pressed it to her heart. When she looked up again, the Apache riders were gone. The canyon was empty. Except for the whisper of the wind and the faint echo of his voice, carried through the rocks like a memory that refused to fade. She stood, her face streaked with tears and dust. The land stretched endlessly before her, vast and alive. Somewhere within it, she felt him, Tarak, the warrior who had once told her to leave, but had instead taught her how to stay. As she walked away from the canyon, the amulet warm in her palm, she whispered softly to the wind, "I will carry your fire, Tarak." Always. And when the wind rose in answer, gentle, familiar, eternal, she knew he had heard.